Welcome to the HR Resource Podcast, a series designed specifically for business owners and executives who want to better understand people to increase productivity and performance. Have you ever applied for a job thinking, yeah, I think I stand a good chance of getting that, and then for some reason hear nothing? Not a sausage, not an email, auto response, bot response, standard reply, nothing. It's frustrating, isn't it? It's annoying. But imagine if you're working in a specialist area. Imagine you're actually very qualified and you've taken a career break from a very good job. And then you've decided that you want to go back into that industry after the period in which you've taken. It might have been for childcare, it might have been for elderly care, it could have been for any reason. But say you've taken a year or 2 years off, maybe longer. Now think about that situation again and compound it by the fact that people are not interested for a myriad of reasons. You've got a gap in your CV. You've got problems that you cannot fix because that is a time period in which you were not in gainful employment as far as the recruiter and the employer were concerned. Well, this was a challenge that my guest on today's podcast had faced and seen and dealt with. And in so doing, decided that it was such a problem that it needed something of a more concerted effort to replenish the situation and give people hope. Natalie Desty is an extremely experienced recruitment consultant. She's run her own business, she's been a director, she's an award winner, and actually she has a doctorate as well for the work that she's been doing based upon getting individuals back into work. She specializes in an area known as STEM. They're interested in industry and sectors that are science, technology, engineering, and maths. Now imagine if you are in that industry and you happen to be female, of ethnic minority, or whatever reason, compounded again by all those factors we talked about with the career break. There is inequality in the workplace, and there's inequality in the recruitment space as well. My guest talks to me today about an initiative that she's just launched and seen the results of called STEM Returners Index. This is a piece of work where we're looking to find out from 750 individuals who are in exactly that position, why they're struggling, what they're finding is difficult, and what we need to put right. And Natalie Desty is the individual who is doing great work in putting people back into work, and she's going to tell me all about it. Enjoy. I am delighted to welcome to the HR Resource podcast, Natalie Desty. Natalie has been involved in a project which I became aware of quite recently, and I think you're going to find this really very interesting indeed. Natalie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Now, we've been chatting a little bit before we pressed record, and obviously there's a lot of things that we can cover, a lot of ground that we can cover. The main element of it will be some research that was undertaken to identify some of the real issues that are faced by people in particular sectors trying to get back into work.
Yeah.
But our listeners are always very, very interested in the person as well that we're talking to. So I'd quite like to understand a little bit more about your career, your background, how you arrived at this point of being involved in such laudable work.
Okay, so my background prior to starting STEM Returners, so we started STEM Returners in 2017, but my background prior to that was as a director of a recruitment business. So I was always in recruitment. I was in that business for 12 years, and I knew that there was an issue in people returning to work. It was something that I was seeing. I was speaking to hiring managers about, and it was something that I was always really interested in. You know, why was there this barrier? I started doing a lot of work with Women's Engineering Society, and because I was in maritime, the Institute of Marine Science and Technology, and just started becoming more interested in that issue and those barriers. And then coincided with that, I had my first and only child, actually, Leo. So he's 5 now. But because I was a director in a business, the idea of going back flexibly or part-time. You know, thankfully culture's really changed, probably the only benefit of COVID. But at that time, you know, the idea was that actually if you were managing people working 4 days a week or working flexibly was very difficult within the business that I was operating in. And I realized this is one of the barriers. So I thought, whilst I was on maternity leave, I'd write a business case, and I'd create a business that I would want to be involved in, which would be about bringing people back after a career break. So I knew there was an issue. I didn't know how that would land within industry, and it was something I was thinking about for a year. I'm also people program chair of something called UK Nest, so that oversees the UK naval defence industry.
Okay.
And at that time, we were looking at ways that we could bring people back. So there's a big skills gap within engineering in general, but particularly within naval. And there's also a real lack of diversity. So if you look at diversity within engineering, it's about 8 to 10% female, 6% ethnic minority candidates. It's even less than that in naval. So naval engineers are made up of about 5% women. So we were looking to create a pilot, and I thought, what a good opportunity to kind of pilot this idea that I've had about returning people. So we did a pilot. Luckily, organisations like BAE Systems and Babcock were the real kind of early adopters of that pilot. Created it. It was really successful. And then STEM Returners kind of became a company in its own right. I left my job. I created this company, and luckily other organisations started seeing what we were doing. So, you know, moving on from that kind of BAE and Babcock community, and we still work with them today, but companies like SSE saw it and BT, and it kind of organically grew into an organisation. So something that started as a bit of an idea and a pilot, thankfully now is a company. And we've now returned 186 engineers to various different organisations. So
that's impressive. That is really impressive. In sort of a slightly over 2-3 year period.
Yeah, about 2.5 years. So we started, you know, initially we actually in 2017 we started in October. So really it's from kind of 2018 by the time returners started in those businesses. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And what's been really interesting is when COVID hit, you know, like probably many business owners, I was thinking, oh my gosh, you know, how is this going to affect us, and how is it going to affect recruitment? And we're busier than ever, and we've been busier than ever throughout the whole kind of COVID period. So we've been really thankful and lucky that actually the momentum was there, and it's kind of taken us through and continued. You know, businesses have really continued investing in diversity and returning returners.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. You hear a lot of variation in how people have been affected by COVID, and it's good to hear that there are businesses that are doing particularly well and finding a way to grow their businesses through it.
I mean,
and I think for those individuals that are perhaps, do you think it's a fallout from people who've been made redundant and are looking to get back into the game again quite quickly?
Yeah, it's really changed the returner kind of pool, if you like, because returners by nature, they've tried really hard to return in the past. So our longest returner had a career break for 17 years, but a lot of people are kind of around the 2-year period in terms of career breaks. But we don't set any kind of rules. So if you're struggling through standard channels and you're out of work, you're a returner. So obviously the people affected by COVID also come into that returner community, because obviously there are a huge amount of redundancies, particularly from certain sectors like oil and gas is a good example. So one other thing that we do within this business is transfer skills. So, you know, for example, we do a lot of work with maritime. We might be looking for a mechanical design engineer. We would be looking to transfer somebody's mechanical design experience from designing aerospace or automotive, and we'd be looking to bring that to shipbuilding. So, you know, as well as returning people, you're transferring them. So those oil and gas candidates, you know, with lesser opportunities, we're looking to transfer those into other sectors.
And you're perfectly placed geographically, aren't you? You were down in Southampton, I understand.
Down in Southampton, yeah. So it's been great for our kind of maritime routes, but we've pretty much covered most counties now in terms of programs. So, and we do loads in Scotland, a little bit in Ireland. So it's very much become UK wide. And last year I actually found a partner to launch STEM Returners Australia as well. So
I saw that on your website. I was going to bring
last
that
year.
up. That's
Yeah,
really an interesting sort of like, to start, okay, we'll have a little sort of venture into France or maybe just a bit further. No, let's go to Australia.
Let's go to Australia, other side of the world. Yeah, so luckily I knew someone in Australia, and we get asked by clients all the time in America, actually, like, when are you going to do this in America? This is so needed. So I find it really interesting how there are just so little of so little of this going on, because returners are it's a really big community of people.
Yeah.
And they literally, genuinely, they have no chance through standard channels. They've tried really, really hard to return, and then they've just gone off and they're doing something else because they think, actually, STEM's not interested in me.
We're going to get into some of the specifics of the reasons why that is the case and why people are struggling, which I think the listeners are going to find fascinating. But before we do that, one of the things that I think would be helpful, because I don't want to try not to, I'm often the nugget in the room that asks the really basic questions. So on behalf of people who may not fully understand the area or the sectors in which you work on, could you explain STEM?
STEM, yeah. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering and maths. So interestingly, a big part of what we do is actually engineering. And I think one of those key reasons that engineering have really picked it up is because there are such advanced skills gaps within engineering. So it's one of the biggest areas. My dog.
That's
sorry.
Right.
She's a puppy. So she's.
Is that the puppy pointer? Is it the puppy
pointer? Puppy pointer, yeah. So she's quite naughty. Yeah. So engineering actually is one of the biggest areas that have taken it up. We do quite a lot in science as well. Technology, again, is a very big one. Technology returners really, really struggle. So if you think of your average software engineer, there's a big misconception about how people's skills deteriorate. And because obviously software and IT moves quite quickly, people within the IT space struggle even more than other areas. And then maths kind of comes in across a number of our different programs, really. So things like economists, and obviously a lot of engineers and people have maths degrees prior to engineering. And then another big thing, which I never understand the issue, is we have a load of PhD candidates. So people who have done a PhD, presumably thinking, well, this is really going to elevate my career, really, really struggle because they're not eligible for graduate roles because they're over experienced, and then they're not eligible for kind of direct level entry engineering roles because they're viewed as too research based. So and we'll cover this later, but there are just so many different types of people that are struggling through these kind of standard channels.
It's crazy, and it's great to shine a light on that. I mean, I remember going to an event I did when I was working for a law firm. I did a lot of work on the academy or academization of schools, and at one event I heard Kenneth Baker, a politician, talking about an introduction of new schools that were going to be sweeping the country. I'm not sure where we are with that particular project, if it happened. But I do remember him at that time, and this is going back a few years, talking about the statistics about the lack of engineers, qualified engineers, and the need that this country is going to have for people with those particular skills, technical science and engineering skills. And we're still talking about it. And, when you look at the statistics about how many people are actually female or of ethnic origin who are not able to get into the work, but for some reason we've got the gap, it's a sort of perfect opportunity to say, well, hang on a second, knock a few heads together. And I know I'm oversimplifying massively now, but that's literally what you're doing, is finding a way to translate the opportunity for these people into a reality, which is fabulous. So what with a lot of the podcasts that we do, we've had a conversation about this. There is a style. Some people might be having a quick listen to this and say, right, I'll get back to that a bit later. I would like you, Natalie, just to give us a quick opportunity to find out how we can find out about you, your contact details, and a bit more about STEM returners.
So yes, I'm Natalie Desty. You can find me on LinkedIn. The website is www.stemreturners.com. There's lots of blogs on there and some kind of press as well to give you a good overview of the programme.
Full of really good content. I've had a good look at it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So and that is definitely worth a look if you are in one of those industries or as an employer, and equally if you're looking for that return to work. Now, in an effort to raise awareness of, and I'm sure to better understand the situation, you recently undertook a survey called the STEM Returners Index. And I understand, I believe that was the first one of its kind. It's going to be an annual event.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be annual. It was important to us to understand firsthand what those barriers were, and the best way we can do that, we know there's a problem, and we'll keep telling industry that there's a problem, but the best way for us to really understand it was to talk to returners and see what experience they were having. So yes, we're going to do that every year, hopefully to be able to track improvements.
And you managed to have conversations with 750 people who were, and these are the returners, these are the individuals that are taking a career break or out of work, looking to return into a STEM related role. How did you find those 750? What was?
So because we've obviously run a number of programs, we've got a lot of returners that we're talking to that are registered, that are looking for programs. So really it was people that we'd either worked with before or who were looking for programs. In fact, we've got about 4,500 returners that are actually that are looking, and I don't think that's probably reflective of the returner community. I went to a conference, actually, it's one of the reasons I started STEM Returners in 2014, and that was Women's Engineering Society, who said that there were 20,000 women that had left engineering and were looking to potentially return. And then another fun stat, do you like a stat, is that 40% of 40-year-old women fall off professional registration. So there's a huge community of people, and the reason they're probably falling off professional registration is that they're on the career break.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a huge community, but yeah, we've got 4,500 people who are now looking for a return to the sector.
And in undertaking this work now, obviously, there's a sort of the element that nobody can overlook is COVID. So I would imagine there's a skewing of a certain amount of the responses that are going to be impacted by that. It's going to be really interesting to see now, starting when COVID hit, how we recover from that, or how that sort of looks next year and the following year.
Yeah, it's really interesting because that returner landscape has really changed, because obviously of redundancy. So we'll probably talk about it, but the key reasons people take a career break, they're quite varied, but obviously redundancy has had a big spike in terms of a reason for a career break. So
yeah, and there's this whole idea, this concept. I mean, I've been in a situation where I'm recruiting and hiring people in, and I'll look at a CV and I'll have made decisions. But there is a perception, obviously, that if somebody is coming back after a break, be it a year, 2 years, 5 years, 17 years in one particular case, that person has no longer attained the level of ability than they had previously. They've lost the skills, they've lost the I suppose cognitive ability to be able to undertake that type of work. So they're written off. Is that from an employer? How do you persuade an employer that that's just not the case? What is the compelling argument that says actually think again? Yeah,
I mean, all of those returners that we've returned, and as I said, various different lengths of career break, they prove it themselves. Essentially, we're asking hiring managers to take an opportunity to give an opportunity to somebody who's currently being filtered out through your standard recruitment channels, and the returners prove it for themselves. So they go on a 12-week placement. That's a paid placement. 12 weeks to increase their confidence and competence, and also 12 weeks for the hiring manager to have the, allay any fears and then be in a position to offer them a permanent position. So of all the returners, of all those 186 returners, 96% of those have gone permanent with the host company. So, we don't have to do a lot.
That says a lot. That speaks loud and clear, doesn't it? That
absolutely. And, before I started this company, it was probably my biggest concern. I didn't know what level of success, you know, the program would have. But, you know, when employers realize that actually 96, yeah, it's actually 97% of everybody gets a permanent job, you know, I think, why would they not? Because these are roles that they're struggling on.
Yeah.
It's not just roles that they're struggling on, it's roles that they're having absolutely no diversity in their shortlists, you know. And I mentioned the diversity of returners. 51% are female, 38% are from ethnic minority backgrounds. So compare that to 8% in industry for women, 6% for ethnic minority candidates. You know, again, the diversity of these candidates, I think, is a no-brainer for organisations. But, you know, I don't think the problem's with hiring managers. And we had a really interesting case study in the first programme that we ever ran. So we were working with one of our partner companies, and they were looking for a naval architect. It's a really quite niche specialist skill, quite hard to find. And we were working with a single mum. She'd taken a 5-year career break, and she'd applied to this particular organisation on three separate occasions.
3 occasions?
3 different times.
These 3 separate jobs, or?
3 separate,
okay.
Yeah, 3 separate naval architect jobs that had come up at different points over a 6-9 month period. And I spoke to her and said, oh, you're really suitable for this one. She said, I can't apply. I've applied there 3 times. And she said, you know, number one, I'm going to look like a stalker. And number 2, they're just not interested in my skills. So I was like, this is weird, because, you know, her skills were really good. And yes, she'd had a 5-year career break. Anyway, so I thought, well, it's strange. So I phoned the hiring manager and said, weird one, I've got a really good candidate. However, I think you've seen her before and she's been rejected. So sent over the CV. He called me straight back and he said, Natalie, I have never seen this lady's CV. And if I had, I'd have interviewed her. So what had happened, and it was a really good lesson early on, is actually she'd been filtered out each time. And and that was by agencies. So that hiring manager, who I thought held that unconscious bias and was rejecting her because she'd had a career break, never even seen it. You know, and I think that's the really interesting thing. There is unconscious bias out there, definitely, but the issue that you've got is when you're working, say, and obviously I've got an agency background, I know how that works. You're sending your best 3 candidates, or your top 3. The person with the career break, in comparison to the people without, they're the ones that get filtered out. Yeah. So it's more, we're providing a bridge directly between the hiring manager and the returner, and just removing those barriers that mean that they never get seen in the first place.
Because they'll perceive it as a risk and they don't really see beyond that.
Yeah, they don't.
That gap in the timeline that screams to them, that's a risk. We're not going to look good in front of our clients, so therefore we're not going to put that particular candidate
forward. Put them forward, because I've got to send 3 candidates, and I've got 3 here without a career break. So yeah, the one with the career break, off they go. Yeah. And most of the time, candidates these returners, they don't even get a response. So it's not even that they're being rejected. They don't hear back. They're just throwing their CVs into a black hole, and that's why they go away and stop looking completely. So we have to work really hard to find them, because they've left.
This filtering, I wanted to sort of dive into this a little bit. The filtering of the agencies in these particular circumstances. I've been aware in the periphery of a couple of projects on the recruitment side where there's an increasing use of AI because of the volume, the sheer volume of people that are just throwing anything down as an application on Indeed or Read or whichever the platform they use. There are plenty of others that are available. So which systems are used? I mean, ultimately, my always feeling about this is going back to my really old sort of computer education with my business studies course, where we talked about garbage in and garbage out. If an algorithm is going to be put in place and programmed, what are you actually going to be training it to do? Is it going to be that intelligent, or are you actually going to tell it that it should look for gaps in the careers? If that's happening, then there is a wider problem, isn't there? And it goes beyond the sense of somebody looking at it and the personal bias. They've actually applied that bias to a system or to a process. Am I dreaming this up? Is this like Total Recall gone nuts, or am I? Do you think it?
Yeah, it definitely happens, because if you think of an average design software, AutoCAD, for example. So in a job spec, people or AI will be looking for a particular software or particular package. Well, somebody on a career break, who's been out for 5 years, possibly used the package before. So, those people would be filtered out. So I think that it definitely happens. And majority of roles also ask for recent experience. And, again, that completely knocks somebody out with a career break, doesn't it?
And this whole unconscious bias, I'm not going to go into detail for obvious reasons, but I have been aware of circumstances where people have been filtered out for, their name looking though it's somebody that might not be from this country, God forbid, as simple as that, which is just so wrong. But I've been aware of those situations. And to me, that seemed very obvious, but for other people that they might not even know they're doing it, that are not making those decisions based on other reasons. They might justify a particular exclusion for all sorts of other what might seem plausible justifications, rather than actually the fact is you think that they might not have. Isn't there a statistic, something about the number of the engineering sector? So many percent, not over 90% is male and over 90% is white?
Yeah, 94% male and 92% male, 94% white. Which is crazy, particularly from minority ethnic candidates, because 28% of engineering graduates are from ethnic minority backgrounds, yet 6% work in the industry. Where do they go? It's and on the graduate, we do quite a lot of, we don't do graduate programs as such, but direct entry graduates. So we would work with 2020 graduates who didn't get a job. Actually, they've got no chance against 2021 graduates because their experience isn't as recent, is it?
Why didn't you get a job in 2021?
Absolutely. That there's a lot of bias with those candidates. And they've got their degree, but they're working for Uber or they're working in Pizza Hut. They're completely out of the industry, thinking that they don't have any way back. So we work with those types of graduates, and it's just really interesting percentage-wise. Those people who didn't get a role, often they're female, often they are ethnic minority candidates, or they don't perform well in assessment centres, so for example, have a neurodiverse brain set. And actually these assessment centres, again, are so biased, set up for, let's find our future leader. Well, actually, not everybody fits into that category, and not every organisation wants everybody to be a future leader. So there's another problem there with graduates. So we find so many graduates that have fallen through those kind of graduate assessment centre cracks. So
I didn't actually go to university, but I went to an assessment centre where I was facing a number of graduates, and it was for a major UK bank, who I won't name. And it was back in the day when there seemed to be plenty of jobs around, and I ended up being offered 3 roles, which was just incredible. Lack of academic capability, but I've got there somehow. Maybe it was just the gift of the gab. But I on this particular case, that was the truth, because I sat in an assessment where I was given a booklet of questions that ranged in, I was like an intelligence test, I think, basically, but it was like a maths test, my living nightmare of a thing to have to do. Anyway, I worked my way through it. I got to a point where I thought, well, this is just burning my brain now. So I wrote, can't do anymore. And actually the person who was running the course read it out to everybody in the assessment, and who said this, I had to put my hand up, and everybody laughed. And I thought, that's me finished. I'm now, woo, you're out, that's it, you're done. I went into the next stage, was an interview with the HR manager, and we might have just touched on that assessment part of it, but then we had a conversation about caravanning. My parents had been taking me caravanning since I was about 10, for about 10 years. So we would just, we just talked about that all around the area of Gloucestershire where I was then. I got offered a place. And now when I'm reflecting back,
right off, David.
Sorry?
That would have put me right off. I'm definitely not a cannibal.
But I think the point there is, you made a connection with somebody, and they saw something that they reflected with, and it was like, whether this guy's right for the role or not, I quite like him.
Yeah.
And he does things that I do, and I can have a conversation with him. So right, okay. Now there might have been more to it than that, but they are conversations. They are things that happen in the real world, aren't they? They are the way that people get recruited.
That's interesting because, you know, I guess that comes into things like affinity bias, you know, and how actually if you like somebody and you think, oh, they'll be a really good team fit, and you're recruiting in your own image, is that, you know, that can also be a real problem. You know, great for you in that instance, you know, but imagine
I didn't take the job, by the way.
You didn't. But, you know, imagine another candidate who actually was very different, you know. So those types of biases, I think, also play a really big factor, because, you know, biases are natural, aren't they? And I think, you know, unconscious bias, everybody has it, but it's recognizing those biases and the value that different ideas, different people bring to a team, rather than somebody who actually you've got that relationship with, or got something in common with, because they like caravanning.
Yeah, quite. How to dull people at parties and all that. You know, that's a real skill. But moving on beyond that, if you've focused in on somebody, because even having not met them, but you've read the CV and you've seen something that stood out, and you think, actually, that's a really good attribute. I really like that. You then start to build a story, a narrative that actually sells that candidate to other people who might be in that decision-making process, because you feel that's the right person for the job, and you overlook the things that are should have equal weight to that job, as to, you know, the way they've dealt with people, the way they've dealt with certain technologies, the way they've, you know, projects they've completed, because you've seen something in them that you've particularly, and that they become your winner, your champion. And that I've seen that happen as well, where people overlook shortcomings because they've seen one thing they think is a thing to take forward.
Yeah.
So we've got in the background to this, I was doing some research, and I'm going to be the one that actually looks at something here, but it's quite scary, the number of different ways in which we can block people from jobs. There's a thing called confirmation bias. You only make information that confirms your beliefs, or ignore everything else. I think it's just what I've been talking about there. The affinity bias, which you talked about. Where have we got here? Similarity bias, caravanning. Projection bias, share the same goals, that people have follow the same beliefs that you do. The halo effect, where you think the person is good, they're good at A, but also, and I think that touches on the thing I was just talking about there, the halo effect being one thing being good means that they're going to be good at everything, which is very much not the case. And the pitchfork effect, which tells you this actually comes from the US, this particular blog, the opposite of the halo effect, where you see and hear something negative, and then you assume that they're going to be rubbish at everything. So it turns that around. Status quo bias, I don't think that's got anything to do with a rock band. Non-verbal bias, effective expectation anchor. You're convinced that an earlier candidate was best for your job, so you don't take into consideration any later candidates. That's an interesting one in naval areas, having an anchor bias. So I just think it's many and varied, and employers, and it sounds to me like agencies, need to have some training. They need to be made aware that this is going on.
Yeah, you know, like I said, bias is completely natural, but it's making sure that you kind of check that. And I think, you know, the key thing for the returners, or the key problem, is that they don't even get to this stage. You know, they don't even, they're biased against because they've had a career break, but they don't, you know, that kind of bias we're talking about, a lot of that is an interview. You know, these candidates don't even get there. So, you know, it's an even bigger issue for
actually getting your foot through the door,
getting in the room.
So what did that survey, what are the key takeaways from the survey for you?
So I think the most interesting thing really is there's a big push, a very necessary push on D&I, you know, particularly within engineering, you know, and I think representation of women and ethnic minority candidates probably needs some work in a lot of sectors, but certainly within engineering, you know. And I think it's so interesting that there is this group of people out there that are 51% female and 34% minority ethnic candidates who are getting completely overlooked. I mean, that is just crazy, isn't it? You know, when we've got a real diversity issue. We found that 12% of people take a career break through through choice. So, you know, looking to travel the world, or something as exciting. You know, most it's life, you know, and
Yeah.
actually career breaks should be a normal part of life. You know, big one obviously is maternity, but I think the term caring actually sums it up better, because it's not just childcare, it's also elderly care, sick relatives,
Very
got people
increasingly
looking
true,
to return.
yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Redundancy, big one, obviously impacted by COVID. Health. So 19% of our returners have taken a career break for health reasons, you know, physical health, mental health, and also relocating their skills. So we work, you know, and it's a big portion of these ethnic minority candidates who relocate to the UK have really great experience, but they've got it internationally, you know, and there's a real bias around, oh, but you haven't done that in the UK. We're talking about a software engineer who's used the same software in another country. We're talking about a bridge engineer who's built a bridge in another country that's actually
Universal languages and bridges. Don't they do the same thing?
Absolutely. You know, but find it absolutely impossible because they can't demonstrate that UK experience, you know, and that's just, it's such a set bias that we come
Xenophobia, isn't it? It's
well, yeah.
just, you know, it's so wrong. And then they are excluding themselves from getting a richer variety of candidates that could be doing such a much better job, I would have thought. I mean, it's the very least, you know, there's fishing from a very small pool.
Very small pool. And you know, and that's why no diversity is coming through these shortlists, because, you know, I worked with an organisation a little while ago, really big player in renewable energy, who get so many applications for all the jobs. They didn't need this for recruitment at all. Their concern was that they get the pick of the bunch, and everybody wants to work there. So what they're getting is the same type of candidate from their competitors, who are fantastic candidates, but they're getting absolutely no diversity. So a lot of organisations we work with are really struggling to recruit, you know, niche software engineers, for example. You know, this organisation was, we need some diversity, and we need to start seeing different candidates, because all we're attracting is the same people as who work here, the same people, you know, the same people as the managers. And I think, you know, I think that's really important. Most companies embark on this because there's a skills gap and they're trying to attract a different pool of talent, but actually, you know, bringing those diverse thoughts, opinions and experience in is just so vital. And I think, you know, lots of good stuff is happening around D&I, you know, particularly within engineering, but you know, actually, you know, seeing that in practice within people's teams, you know, I think another important thing is the change of culture. So when people do bring returners in, and people with different experiences, you know, hiring managers who might have been, you know, a bit reluctant or a bit of a, oh, what's this new initiative, you know, what are we doing now, actually see the benefit and the value of bringing people in with different skills. Because, you know, on a career break, people learn lots of different skills, you know, caring, maternity, whatever the career break is, bringing their skills and experience from other countries, you know, and now culturally it's starting to change those organizations who really see the benefit and the value. And you would imagine, you know, that returners programs won't be necessary in the future, because actually it won't be seen as a barrier, because you're changing hearts and minds of those hiring managers that have seen for themselves the value that it brings.
Yeah, your ultimate goal is to make yourself redundant.
I know, that's not great,
But
is it?
well, no, you're successful at that. You'll be going on to the much bigger, greater things. I'm absolutely.
Hopefully, or I'll be looking for a job.
No, I think what you're doing is fabulous, and unfortunately, I think there's enough work to be going at to keep you busy for quite a time yet.
I think
one of the things that you touched on there, which is the skills that people gain when they're on a break. Although I was what you might consider to be in the traditional unit of the family, where my wife actually stopped working to be able to bring up our 3 children. And very grateful I own it. Now she's the high flyer, running a ballet school and 120 pupils, and showing the world what she's capable of, but nobody would give her a job. And it's that's just a case in point. And from my point of view, in work, even though I didn't take the career break, the number of times that I drew on the things that we don't have the manual. I know there's self-help books out there, but as a parent, Natalie, you don't know immediately what to do you? When there's a challenge faced to you by a child, you have to use an instinct. You learn, but the things that you learn as a parent I have to tell you, the number of times I applied that at work, it's quite scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you get disputes or you get problems or you're trying to calm a situation down.
Mhm.
You know, okay, we didn't always use the naughty step, but the reality, in figuratively speaking, you do, because sometimes people need to chill out. They just need
Mhm.
to find a different room or find a different place. And parenting skills actually are very, very useful in the workplace, because you do learn to
Absolutely.
mediate, you do learn to communicate in a different way, in a different style, you learn patience. And from my point of view, who's considered by my wife to be somebody who's not very good at this, you do actually learn to multitask.
Yeah.
So there are things that you can do with that. So, and as from the survey's perspective, are you going to be keeping to the same broad questions going forward? Is it going to adapt, or are you going to have a core of similar questions? And
Yeah, we'll try and keep to the same one. So I think that's important to show
yeah,
the change, hopefully the positive change in industry. I mean, looking at some of the others, so obviously we've talked about female and how they're disproportionately affected by childcare. So 51% of women said that they were struggling to return due to childcare, lack of flexibility. 10% of men said the same. So, women, I think, are always going to feel the brunt of childcare and caring, or certainly, hopefully not always, but certainly currently feel the brunt of that. And women, weirdly, are 76% more likely to never receive feedback on their applications. So I mean, why? It's really, really interesting.
it's an interesting.
Returners over 45 never receive feedback. So there's an ageist thing going on in this unconscious bias. And 36% of returners felt that they had experienced direct bias. So when somebody had when they'd interviewed or they'd put an application in, 36% felt that they had been biased against. And the key reason for that was things like asking for flexibility. So I've ruined my chance because I've said I can only work a 4-day week, or I've ruined my chance because I need to do the school run. And we have a lot of women who've managed to return, but at a much lesser capacity. So we recently placed a project engineer, and she used to be a project engineer. Then she had children and she needed to do the school run. So she had returned to engineering in administration, and she was very grateful for that, but actually we've put her back to being a project engineer. So
Brilliant.
It's not always about people who haven't returned. It's people who are working below their capability just because they dare to request flexible hours. So, that's quite a big part of it as well.
And isn't there also, I think I picked up from, I'm not sure whether it was the research or one of the blogs I may have read on your website, but it's the impact of going back into the workplace, those that are successful and they have managed to get a job, and then finding that there's bias towards them in the workplace because of maybe they have got flexibility, that they or there's a flexibility and issue to what they have to do. I mean, surely by now we've all learned that, but no doubt people will want to fall back into old habits, and some of them might not be good habits, but the confidence that they might lack because of being out of work for some time and coming back into work, the onboarding process is maybe lacking and left them in a situation where they just felt not up to the job. I mean, have you encountered some of that as well? So how far does your scheme run in terms of bringing them into the workplace? Do you continue to work with them on a mentoring basis or supportive?
Yeah, so it's quite a lot of questions there, David. So let me start at question one.
I did ramble on.
No. So I was really interested in the experience that returners have had when they returned, and like you say, this kind of level of resentment. And the experience I've had of it have mainly been from kind of hiring managers of like, oh, well, I haven't had the opportunity to have a career break. I've worked 30 years without a career break. So, why should they get special treatment? Well, actually, as I explained before, only 12% of people have actually decided to take a career break. Not that that's a bad thing either. It should be somebody's choice if they were, if they've worked 25 years and decide to take a year off. So I was really surprised by that level of resentment. And, I think it's this idea, all we're trying to do is give people an equal opportunity. for them to get seen in the first place, but it's a different scheme, because if you compare a returner to a non-returner through standard recruitment channels, these are the people that get filtered out. That's what we're trying to stop. So it is a standalone scheme, and I think that could be some level of resentment, like, so basically it was easier for you to get into this organisation than me.
Almost like positive discrimination.
Yeah, almost like positive discrimination, and it just isn't. All we're doing, all it's doing is removing those barriers that mean that these candidates don't get seen. The 12-week program, they're all there on their own merits and their own capability, because that's the point of the 12 weeks. The hiring manager isn't obligated to hire them after that point. They get that on their own merits. Now, because I've answered your first one, I've forgotten the second question. What was the second?
It's about the confidence.
Oh, the confidence piece. So because returners have tried really, really hard and literally applied for, on occasion, hundreds of vacancies and not been successful, it really impacts their confidence, as you can imagine. So they are low confidence. They talk themselves out of applying for positions because they don't think they're suitable, and that they will even talk themselves out of applying for a returner's position, even though it's specifically geared up for them, because their confidence is so low. So we work with them prior to starting the program on confidence, from a coaching capacity. They also get a mentor through Women's Engineering Society, and we're just on hand throughout that 12-week period, so that if they do have any questions or they are feeling low confidence on something, because it can feel a bit like a 12-week interview. It kind of is a bit of a 12-week interview. Actually, being able to come to ask any questions that they wouldn't feel comfortable maybe raising. But genuinely, we find 2 weeks in, they're just like everybody else. You wouldn't be able to pick out your returner from your person who had come from a competitor. They're kind of right back to where they were. It's the thought and the anticipation of, am I going to be able to do this because I have been rejected so many times, versus actually when they're there, it's a bit like that old adage of riding a bike.
Yeah. I mean, one of the case studies that I think I picked up on was, I'm not sure it's the same lady that you were talking about, but somebody that had gone back into a naval role and has won awards and has sort of been
I know,
shining light. I mean, that was within a very short spell of getting back into the place of work, and really proved her place, but she was lacking an awful lot of that confidence initially, and didn't feel that she was an imposter syndrome. I shouldn't really be here.
That's it. Imposter syndrome, that's it. And those awards that she had won those against everybody. It wasn't like it was a returner award that she'd won. She'd done it on her own merit, but she was incredibly low confidence before she started. And I think some of that, and I think it's a female thing as well, David, if I'm honest, in terms of that imposter syndrome. And she struggled with it for quite a long time, and actually now, you really see the difference in her. She's been promoted, and she's believing in her capability again, but it can take a long time, when you've been knocked so many times, it can take a long time to kind of get that confidence back. So yeah, she's such a perfect example of exactly why we do this program.
I've been really fortunate to work with some people that have been quite inspirational, and actually I've pointed in part of my lockdown, I managed to track down my first boss in a marketing role, Jackie Elliott, who's still living just outside Stamford in Lincolnshire. And I wasn't really stalking her. I used the alumni at Thomas Cook to find her, and a bit of stalking. And we had a really nice chat and catch up, and she was really embarrassed when I said she was the best boss I'd ever had.
Really?
I think that's, I mean, it's nice. You don't really want an arrogant response, but it was like, no, surely not. No, not me. No. Really, but there's a lot of talent. She went on to be a very successful teacher as well. I'm not surprised at that. And just only today, I was finding one of my daughter's friends is working for a company that I think you might have some connection with or have worked with. I don't know if you come across a company called Analox, who produce gas sensing equipment for submariners and in the space industry as well. They're up in the well, they're a company that you should have a look at. There's a young lady that I've worked with over a number of years. Which with young lady we started working together, Vicky Brown, and she was in the marketing department. She headed up the marketing team, and now she's the managing director. of analogues, and it's fabulous to see a
Yeah.
woman, and she always impressed me. She never failed to impress me in the meetings that we had. She was organized, she was considered, she would listen. She wouldn't be the loudest person in a meeting, but she had a finger on the pulse, and I'm not surprised to see her get to the very top of that organization. Certainly somebody you should check out, because I think she's encouraging now that my friend, my daughter's friend, Catherine, who's working for her now, she's incredibly bright, and I think she's very lucky because she's got herself into a job now working in an organization where, in a marketing role, one where the managing director actually is a marketer, which is quite surprising and unusual, but a woman.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, that's brilliant. You know, I think there needs to be more of that, and that needs to be encouraged, because we're talking about it because it's rare.
Yeah. No.
We shouldn't really be talking about it. We should be like, oh yeah, you know,
Shouldn't be a thing. Yeah.
But it's to me, it was like a real signal of what should be done. Is there, in terms of raising awareness within the industry, I think we might have had a quick chat around that before, is there, and now the survey's out and you're doing a sort of press round and talking to people like me on podcasts about this sort of thing, what else do you think will now be following on for STEM returners and getting into employers and the recruitment industry to raise awareness of what you're doing?
I mean, all we're really asking people to do is to be aware of their own unconscious bias, be aware of the research, be aware that there are a large group of people who are currently locked out of their standard channels. We're asking recruiters to include returners in your shortlists, to tackle unconscious bias. We're asking recruiters to talk to companies about what they're doing in D&I and their D&I strategies and initiatives, and really just stop overlooking really highly skilled, highly qualified candidates. You know, I mentioned PhD candidates before. You know, why are they struggling to get a job? You know, just to be aware of it and to include those people in shortlists and just give them this equal opportunity, really. I mean, you know, running a program, as I said, you know, it should be something that is not needed in the future, because actually, you know, the barriers that are there can be taken down really quite easily with people just reaching out to returners and including them in those shortlists.
And it's the awareness of sort of the bias, that
awareness of bias,
the multi-leveled areas of bias, and maybe a training course. Maybe, you know, I know that there are some studies of employers, leaders of organizations who've been at pains to get their employees, certainly in hiring situations, to be aware of the decisions that they're making and to be far more aware of what you're really trying to do is employ the best person for the job. You're not trying to, you know, recruit a mate or somebody that for whatever reason you feel is suitable, other than the fact that they've got the key attributes that are required, and maybe thinking about outside the box as well. To bring in some diversity, to bring in some difference into the organization. And what about the actual returners themselves? What's the next step for STEM returners and raising awareness with individuals in the industry?
So hopefully we'll continue running programs. So as I said, we've returned 186 people. So we really want to kind of build and grow on that and work with different organizations. We've been really lucky to work with some really great forward-thinking, progressive, big companies. You know, I've mentioned Babcock, BAE, SSE, BT. We really want to kind of make sure that SMEs are looking at these groups of individuals as well. We've actually worked with 2 really exciting startups as well, and that was really great. You know, brought a new dynamic. You know, actually thinking about bringing in diverse talent right from the kind of outset to set the culture of these organizations. So yeah, I think we want to do more with the SME market. Obviously keep working with our partners that we're working with now, and just kind of broaden it out really throughout engineering, because, you know, these returner programs are few and far between in the industry. It's really, there might be a couple of other examples, but it's really only us that are kind of, you know, working within this returner space. And you know, there's just so many candidates out there, and there's so many jobs that need filling, and there's no diversity. I can't work out how it's such a struggle, you know, just to open the opportunities. And I think one of the key things, apart from removing that bias, is really thinking about your adverts. People they don't put adverts out, they put a job spec out.
Yeah.
And obviously somebody who's low confidence and there's massive, great big technical tick list, they're not going to apply. They're going to talk themselves out. So, really thinking about your employer brand, what you're doing to attract different types of people. We very rarely get applications through job boards, through LinkedIn, because these are candidates that have left. We actually get most of our returners through word of mouth, or actually from local schools. So we kind of pitch it as a mid-career initiative with a local school. If we're running a program in Southampton, we'll contact all the local schools and say, can you put this in your newsletter? We're trying to attract parents and families of school children. So, think about who you're attracting and where you're attracting those people as well. And, not just putting a technical job spec on LinkedIn and expecting to get a diverse application pool.
Yeah, there's more to it than that for sure. And for the organisation itself, STEM Returners, what next in terms of its organisational makeup? Is there need for more hands to help you to get how will that work?
We've just recruited 2 new people because we've needed to, because this is very much an organic organisation that I made up and I'm continuing to make up in a way as I go along. So as more programs come online, obviously we're looking to bring more people into. We know the returners are out there, but we obviously need more staff to make sure that we can deliver all of these programs that are coming in. And we're getting so many organisations contact us to say, actually D&I is a real problem, and we're not getting applications for some of these roles. So the appetite in the industry is really, really positive. So I think we're going to have to really scale up what we're doing, which is a really good problem to have. But certainly a challenge, for us over the next 6 to 12 months will be scaling up enough so that we can continue delivering this on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is that we're having this conversation. You and I have this conversation now, but there's a conversation on a much wider scale taking place about diversity and about the need to raise the bar when it comes to our employment of staff. And certainly, you raised the specifics of engineering. If this country is going to be successful, if we're going to be able to produce things and create things, we need those skills in the workplace. And it's crazy to think there's a shortfall in skills when there's people looking for work. There's
a massive shortfall in skills in engineering. And then there's this big graduate community that we've talked about that haven't been able to even start their career. And there's this big returner community. So it's really interesting. I think another key thing is moving that diversity conversation beyond women. Women are a big part of it, but I think things like the gender pay gap, although they were great, really put that focus, we need to recruit more women, and if a company ever says to me, can you send me female engineers, it's like, no, that's not what we do. We return people after a career break, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So diversity and creating a diverse and inclusive culture is not about handpicking the statistics that you need to make your business
ticking a box. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, very good point. Natalie, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm sure we can carry on for about another hour, but I'm sure your dog needs to be looked after. That's many of the one things
running through.
There's many and one other things that you need to get to, but the time that you've afforded us today has been greatly appreciated.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're doing fabulous work. I know one of our other guests on the podcast, Dave Stephanie, will be fascinated to hear about what you're doing. We'll know about what you're doing, obviously, but I'm sure she's a huge supporter. Thank you again. If you need to get hold of Natalie, stemreturners.com. Yeah, stemreturners.com. Great website. And on LinkedIn, Natalie Desty you'll be able to connect with her that way. Thank you very much, Natalie. We'll speak again soon.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.